up to Malmö 14 years ago, on the 1st of January 2001, after a really short warm-up, 2 weeks, actually no, a month first, where I came to design a piece of software at the art school here, which is not an art school, I learned later, which is a design and communication school, but we call it art school because we're cool. It very well defines what I do. I usually do what I feel when I feel that it's needed, and I don't really wait for things to happen. I don't wait for having money. I don't wait for, getting anybody to tell me, oh yeah, go ahead. No, if I feel that something is needed, I just go make it. And then I try to make it fit into whatever nice situation we find. So right now, after 14 years running this thing with zero budget, the university has told me they're going to hire a lecturer to run the lab, which makes it official, which is really cool. But this very well defines what I do. I just make something because I feel it's good, and then I push it out, and then somebody takes over. And in cases like this, they don't even pay for it, which is fine. But what I'm gonna here to talk about today is about technology and education, actually. And there is a moment in technology when it's handed over by those that are, let's say, the power users into everybody. And when that happens is when something very interesting happens, for example, in education. So now, in mobile telephony, for example, we made it to the personal device that everybody has. And you see 11-year-old kids. I made a workshop in robotics 4 years ago, sponsored by Stapelbäcksparken. And we're asking the kids, oh, when is one of your parents coming to pick you up? And all of a sudden they would say like, oh, I just have to call him. And they were like 12-year-old kids, and they had their own mobile phone, they were going to call their parents. Right? So when this moment happens, that means that all of a sudden you have a really powerful tool to do whatever you want to, right? And this is what I look into all the time. When are these defining moments in technology that allow you doing things? So some years ago, we realized that microcontroller technology was ready to be used in education, and we decided to design our own boards for designers to learn about electronics because we felt like there were too many engineers doing stuff with electronics. We needed designers to start designing stuff. So we created a circuit board that design students would build in class, hours of painful soldering, right? And you might say, okay, this is too much. But you know what? After 12 hours, they could do really, really funny things like automatic confession booths, right? So the idea is that we could use something that in theory is technically very complicated for many people, teach it to people that are not exactly technology minded, are as technology creators. Definitely designers are technology users, right? They use technology all the time. And try to look at how technology could define, for example, behaviors, and how this could be used to communicate to people in a different way. So this is what our students did. They thought about machines that could talk as if they were people. In this confession booth, you will just go in and then start like kneeling down, and it will ask you to start confessing, you will confess, and then you will totally get the feeling that it was for real. And we tried with real Catholics, and believe me, they totally thought they had a priest inside. But there is a couple of defining moments in my life, and I've been, pointing at those randomly when I've been making talks. I've been making a lot of talks in the last 6 years of my life. I've been more or less everywhere talking about the exact same thing. And one of the first defining moments in my life actually is the first ever paid gig that I had, and I was 14, and I was asked to teach math. And this is a slide that I use at TEDx Brussels, by the way, in front of 1,600 people. I was not ashamed of showing my socks. But I used to train to be a judo fighter. I train 3 hours a day. I train 7 days a week. And that means that all your life goes around that, actually. Even the way you wear goes around that. For example, I only had white socks because back in the 80s, the sports socks were white. So I only had the traditional white socks with one red and one blue lines. I was never changing socks, but it's not like that. I had 20 pairs of socks, but they were all the same. So I had a classmate, and her mom had a fashion store. And she had problems in math, and she asked me, could you please help me out how to learn these things in math? And I helped her out. And she was like, oh, I really would like to give you something. I was like, no, it's no problem. I was trying to flirt with her, I have to say. And I will not mention her name because this might go public. But things like she said, you know what, I'm going to give you a pair of socks. And I was like, what do you mean? It's like your sock sack, you know. And she paid me with a pair of socks. And then I never thought about it, but 10 years later, I started to think like, wow, you can actually be paid for doing things you like, right? And I realized that teaching was something that I really like. A second defining moment in my life was when I stumbled upon this paper that's called Things That Blink. I don't know if you've ever read this paper, but it's written by a person called Mitch Resnick. And there is something very interesting. This thing you see here is a programming station. And this programming station has 3 buckets and asks you a question. And the whole point is that when you go to this conference, they give you a name badge that is a microcontrol name badge. And it has 10 LEDs. And when you go to these different programming stations, they ask you questions like, which is your favorite food? And you will say like spaghetti, soup, and I don't know, pastrami. And you will go like, put your badge into the pastrami box. And by that, you will automatically program that answer into your badge. And by walking around in the conference, it will tell you which is the degree of similarity between you and the other people at the conference. So it was a conversation starter. Besides the point that at that point, I was an engineer. I had never heard of using technology in a creative way. The idea that you could program something like this was very, very relevant, because I understood that programming is really not about just a keyboard and the mouse. Programming can actually be about any physical action. Anything can be programmed. So the whole world is actually reprogrammable. And that was a defining moment. But the thing is, I'm a bit of an obsessive person. So when I read about Mitch Resnick, I was like, who is this guy? So I had to do research about who is Mitch Resnick. And I stumbled upon his doctoral thesis, which is Turtles, Termites, and Traffic Jams. And he basically rewrote Logo to create a tool to teach kids about very complex processes. So he thought about how to teach kids about behaviors. So he could take a screen, and instead of having a single Logo turtle, have thousands of Logo turtles, and will assign a behavior like, when you do this, then move randomly to the right. And when this happens, then do this. And when you hit another turtle, then go backwards. And by that, he would replicate a lot of very complex behaviors, like how termites move or how a traffic jam works. And this book is defining not because of the technology in it, but because of the process he's using. The way he's looking at how to work with kids, how to ask questions, how to try things out. So at this point, it was very clear to me I had to do something with education, but I didn't know what. But I ended up doing this. And there were actually 5 years between the moment I saw the light, so to say, had my epiphany, and the moment we made Arduino. And we made Arduino after a lot of different iterations on different ends, both me and my partners. And for those of you that don't know Arduino is essentially started as a hardware platform that can be reprogrammed with a piece of software that is open source. And again, the piece of hardware can affect the world, can read things from the world, and the software allows you to reprogram the world, because by reprogramming the world, you actually change the world. And that was the whole idea. And since we made it open source, that helped us creating a community of users from all over the world. It's a community of users that reaches up to over 3 or 4 million people at this point. And of course, we know every one of them in name and family name. And we send postcards for Christmas to absolutely everybody. So you guys are going to get all of Christmas. So the question is always, what can you make? And I just gathered a couple of nice videos. This is the absolutely first ever made Arduino project. Was made by Malmö University in 2005, and it was about controlling body movements. And it was about giving people electroshocks depending on how the music was behaving. And this is for Man Design Center in Malmö. And as you can see, the camera was pretty bad. I still don't understand how they managed to get this perfect square when shooting. And that is Anders, that happens to work for us too these days. He's the CEO. And there you have him dancing to the music. It's pretty cool. It's nice. Don't try this home. Okay. This is another project that we did. Actually, we built this project here in Medea Evolution City, and it was a car that was driving itself when playing music. And it's one of the first tests, and where you get to drive the car. We did this a year and a half ago, and you see there is no driver, and we built the whole remote control car that drives around by music in just 9 days, where nobody in my office slept or ate properly. You know, it's like David there lost 20 kilos. No, I'm kidding. I can only tell you at some point after 3 days without sleeping, your brain starts working differently. So, or you can make gigantic things like this light installation we did in Indonesia last year. I'm gonna let this run for a couple of minutes, or for a minute, because my talk cannot be too long. So literally with Arduino you can do more or less anything within some constraints, and the more you know about it, the more you can do. It's like if you're a painter, all of a sudden you can start making brushes out of the hair from your own head, right? In this case, the more you use this brush, the more you can do about it. So the same board I use with my students to teach them in class, if you put 40 of them together, you can control a 100 meters long installation with 15,200 LEDs. You know, then the rest is renting a quadcopter to just film it from the sky, and it looks great. Anything quadcopter is fantastic. You know, it's like. But I'm here to talk about education, not about what you can do with Arduino boards. And there is a couple of things to look at. And first is that how people classify education is very important, because that makes the whole field very, very complicated. First thing is formal versus after school. I mean, there is this one thing that is where your kids go every day, 6 hours a day of class. And then where your kids go after class, which in Sweden means fritid, which is after school, more or less. And there is the formal education that's part of the curriculum, and there's the informal education that is, let's say, more for fun, And this is one way of classifying education that people look into. And technology actually tends to fall in the after-school programs because people are too scared of trying to push it into the formal education, which is the place where you could actually affect things and provoke change, right? Then there is the whole discussion about tools versus process. And there's a discussion around this because obviously companies are interested in selling you stuff. Companies make circuit boards. Arduino makes circuit boards, right? So of course we want you to buy circuit boards. And people make software, and they want you to buy their software. And people make websites, and they want you to pay them for the websites. But what matters for real is not the tools. What matters is the process. You want the people, the learners, to learn how to be independent, how to use things by themselves, how to build by themselves, how to be critically minded towards technology and know right now it doesn't make any sense to use this. It's better to just talk about it. And this is a conflict that I have with my students a lot of times. It's like they're discussing about something. Oh, we could do this and that. And I said, like, why are we talking about this? Just change the way you think. Like one of the biggest discussions is always about the automatic door lock, which is the project everybody wants to build. And I always say, I never lock my door at nights. And I said, yeah, but then you could just program it so automatically it will lock itself at 9:30 in the night. It's like, what are we talking about? This whole thing is about perceived security. It's about perceived safety. We are being bombed all the time about how insecure our life is. What we need to do is to change the way we perceive our lives and start talking to our neighbors, and we will need no door locks. So with technology in education, it's exactly the same. We are sometimes overdoing the things we're trying to do. Then it's very important to also distinguish this thing, because right now, since a lot of the technology-based education is happening through informal processes, it's happening through culture centers, it's happening through foundations. So they look at audience, they don't look at learners. For real, what they want to do is to reach as many people as possible, as many students as possible. I had a conversation yesterday morning that was heartbreaking. I've been spending the last 3 years of my life building a curriculum for classes, and I went to a foundation that denied us the funding for teaching 50 schools this year, and the 50 schools are not enough schools. And I said, of course, I want to affect 1 million schools, but can you pay what it costs to actually make it with 1 million schools? And they are like, no. Then what are we talking about? And then they just like, okay, but then decrease the quality of your thing so you can make it with more schools. It's like, no. It's not about making it worse. It's about making it optimal for everybody. And then you say, okay, well, then we make it for nobody. I said, okay, we make it for nobody. But I think this is the real problem, is that many people just look at the amount of people they want to reach instead of trying to say, let's make it the best way we can make it. And then one big discussion is individual versus group. And you will agree with me that the best, when you learn the best, is like with my friend when I taught her math in a one-to-one situation. And I have always defended, let's say, the hacker way of teaching. I teach you, and then once you know, you teach the next one, and I teach somebody else, and we grow exponentially as we go. But that doesn't apply to our status quo. We cannot just go change education at schools by teaching the next one and the next one and this one. That's very optimistic, but that's not going to work. And so we have to figure out ways to do this thing in group. And this year, for the first time in my life, I did something I always said I was not going to do, which is I participated in creating a MOOC, a massive online whatever course. And we're supposed to teach 1,000 teachers at once. And again, the conclusion of building this thing, because you have to do it it's like I have a friend that is vegetarian and he eats a big steak once a year. And I ask him, why do you do this? And he says well, you have to do this in order to understand what it means to be a vegetarian. So I had to make a MOOC in order to understand. I don't want to make it again, right? And so I made it, and I realized that in order to make it, you have to make so many compromises. First of all, you have to make a discourse that can reach as many people as possible. And second, you have to make it in coordination with the company that's going to sell this MOOC, because they want to have as much audience as possible. They don't look at learners, they look at audience. So they want you to lower the threshold a lot. So at the end, I was trying to teach a class for teachers, they were asking me to treat them as sheeps, It's like, oh, everybody has to pass, they were telling me, And it's like, but I don't understand that. I mean, we want to put a quality barrier. These people are going to work with our kids in the future, right? And so we want to be fair, but we want to be tough at the same time. So I want to tell you a couple of stories about education processes. I have 5 more minutes, I think. So the first one is about self-learning. And when we made the first Arduino board, this Chinese student came to us, a mechanical engineering student, saying, my teachers are teaching me about this processor. It was an Intel processor that was really, really old, from the 70s. And it cannot really do anything, cannot control physical things, cannot move motors, for example, because you need to be able to produce a certain type of signal. And I would like to use your Arduino board. And at the time, we had made the board like 3 months before. So we had just put a picture of a hand holding the board on the internet and said, this is open source, let's use it. And the guy was like, where can I buy one? And we were like, I have no clue. I mean, we made 150, but it cost like 15 euros. If I put this in an envelope and send it to China, it's going to triple the price. So why don't you just make it yourself? So we gave him all the blueprints, and he made it himself. And we were so proud that he made it, so that we actually sent him an envelope with the parts, so he could make one with a blue circuit board. And we let Malmö Högskola pay, by the way. And then he sent us these pictures and a video that I can't find, unfortunately, of this robot moving around that he hacked together. And he was controlling it via Bluetooth already in 2005, right? So there's a lot of stories like this one, of students that want to go above and beyond what their educational system is offering them, and they look for whatever tools, and by finding open source content on the internet, they can actually go beyond what their teachers are offering them. These people are exceptional, but they exist. Then you find teachers that try to build whatever for as little money as possible. This is a robot that was made in 2006, that actually this robot made it to the cover of 2006 festival, the Sonar Music Festival in Barcelona. Well, this robot made it to the cover of the Sonar Music Festival, to one of the chapters. And it's funny because this robot costs like 24 or 25 euros in parts, being this one of the cheapest ones, the roll-on board from the deodorant. And so it was recycling everything he could, because he had 20 students in class and he wanted every student to build a robot. And the only thing he was reusing from Arduino was the source code, the software. And everything else, he was buying it, whatever he could, as cheap as possible. This is another example where I was teaching kids in Mexico electronics, and at some point I asked them, what do you want to do next? And they told me, I want to make a robot. And I said, I really don't make robots. I hate robots to death. And they said, yeah, but we want to make a robot. As a designer, you have this thing. Sometimes you have to face the dragon. You have to do things that you don't want to do. And so I designed a robot for them with parts we could find in Mexico City. And this was a 40 euros robot. It was super inexpensive. But the best part is that the kids could make it themselves. This particular one is a special edition we did where we printed the thing nicely with drawings on it and so on. But the kids could etch the circuit themselves. And after I left this place where I worked for 3 years at, actually I have to say I work at this place that was created by an initiative that was made by Mitch Resnick. So I was following the steps of the master. So the kids continue making these robots, and they still make them today. And they did things like this with it. So they build their own paper mache constructions on it. And this is Eggy, the smokes dope. Yeah, we'll skip this one. I could talk a lot about 3D printing, but there is not going to be a lot of room. I think it's better to talk about robots, because then what happens is that people are reappropriating other tools to continue doing the same similar things. This is actually a 3D printed robot made by somebody that calls himself Obi-Juan, who is the father of an initiative called Clone Wars, which is an initiative in Spain where people actually do 3D printers and donate it to other people. And that has actually helped a lot of schools and universities to get 3D printers, because they couldn't get them before because they were too expensive. But by making those robots, I made these kids that were 4 times world champions in robotic soccer. And we made a robot together. And the funny thing of making a robot together, again, co-designing something like this, is that the kids themselves, they are world champions. They are experts in making a robot that costs 3,000 euros in parts, and they invest 8 months in it. How many of you would invest 30,000 crowns and put 8 months of your life, 4 hours, 5 hours per week to make a robot? Raise up your hand. Nobody. So that's the problem. I was like, okay, we need to make something that you can bring out of a box and connect to the computer and start programming, right? So we made this robot, and the only thing you need to do is charge the batteries. That's why you have to take a cup of coffee while you wait. And then you get your robot and you can start programming it right away. The same way you can turn on and off a light with an Arduino board, you can just tell this robot, move like half a meter forward, turn to the left, and has a compass on board, can say go towards the north or whatever, and has a screen where it gives you instructions, so you can actually interact with the screen and program a user interface. This was a very nice concept. It's really not selling well because it's still 200 euros, right? So it's still a lot of money. So we came to the conclusion that we had to make something that was cheaper, that could be affordable, used by people. So we made these other robots commissioned by the city of Zaragoza, and we were focusing just in making them show behaviors to kids. And this is like the robot puppy that follows your hand, with a tail, right? But the kids will make whatever out of it, like Garfield with 4 eyes, or a whole bunch of different robots that will go and fight sumo with each other. And this one, they are not what you think. They are big eyes in front. Some people think they are testicles. Kids don't think that way, okay? Let's be clear. So, but things like, you might think like, okay, we're making too much for them. I will say no. I mean, kids are ready to do a lot of stuff. This is a very complex technical problem, which is to make the so-called inverse pendulum. And in the Arduino community, this was solved by a 16-year-old kid from Holland. I know people in Holland are not normal, but the thing is, like, all the source was there. People had been trying, and they were sharing the code on the Arduino forum. At some point, the 16-year-old guy comes and says, look, I sorted it out. I solved it. This is not the 16-year-old guy, okay? It's somebody else. I just can't find the video with the kid, but basically you see it's a very complex technical thing. You just have something on 2 wheels, and will stand on it, on the 2 wheels, and it's like the Segway, right? And you can make it by yourself. I have some other videos of American teenagers building their own Segways controlled with Arduino boards. I'm going to close with this, and it's about the vision. And again, Mitch Resnick, the same guy that comes again and again in all my, education rants, designed something called Scratch. Scratch is a programming language that is a visual programming language used to teach kids how to program in a very easy way. But you know what? This is very nice, but it's very limiting. It takes a lot of time to put these blocks together, and for the amount of behavior you get, you can much faster just code it. And there's been made experiments with kids in Spain where the teachers try to use this kind of block language system with their 15-year-old kids, and after 2 weeks, the kids are bored to death because they already control everything. They already know how to do everything. So we've been looking at how to do something like this. First of all, how to assign more complex behaviors, and second, and this is the hint, if you guys want to work designing visual programming languages, try to create an event-based programming language. Because programming languages right now, they work sequentially, especially for microcontrollers. But kids in their heads and normal people that know how to program, they think event-wise. They think when the temperature hits this level, I want this thing to do this. When the motor goes at this speed, then I want it to turn to the left. When the sensor in the nose detects that I hit the wall, then I want to move backwards. That's how we think about machines. But programming languages right now, the easy ones, don't offer you that possibility. People do these kind of things in the cloud, right? But they don't do it for you for the small thing you have in front of you. So you need to start thinking about how to represent those events graphically and how to make it in a way that works cross cultures. Because in the end, what you want to do is something like this. You want to use state-of-the-art of technology to reprogram the world. Because remember that I told you in the beginning, the whole point here is that the whole world is reprogrammable. So you want to affect the world in an easy way. And you want to affect the world with whatever you have in your pocket, that everybody are having in their pockets. So funny enough, a collaboration with a local company called Top, we actually made something like this. It's still not there. This is software made by Top in Malmö. I don't know if you know them. If you don't know, you should. And we just added our robot to it. And here you see Michael from Top controlling the robot from his phone. And he could just program it in like 10 minutes. Event-based. He had a lot of fun because he didn't see it coming. He didn't expect it to be so easy. He made tremendous work on the software side, I have to say. Okay, so I want to close with this. Thank you very much. And that's what I had to say.